So before I start, I'm going to tell you a dirty little secret from the first service. I got about halfway through the sermon and realized we had never done the reading before, and my sermon relies on that reading, so we had to take a small break and go back and reread it. This turns out that it was a good thing because apparently the first part of my service is very mechanical and robotic. I'm using quotes there. It is. There's a lot of math in here, so we're going to try and make it a little interesting. Just bear with it. About halfway through, we shift into some more exciting stories. Hang on. So everything changes and nothing stands still. This is a quote from the Greek philosopher Heraclitus of Ephesus, who lived roughly between 535 and 475 BC. In my older age, I am coming to appreciate that this is one of the very few truths in life. When I found Unitarian Universalism over 7 years ago now, I certainly experienced a profound change. In the language of my old religion, I believe I have been born again. I was thrust into this warm, welcoming, and supportive congregational home who constantly keeps me and others on their toes. Here, you will find that we try very hard not to stand still, except on Meditation Wednesdays and moments of our prayer during service. I have learned that our core Unitarian Universalist principles prompt us to be the light for this darkened world that cries out for assistance. I believe, in fact, that each of us are called to take the principles of our faith and use them to evoke the change, all change, in the greater world. Our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, demonstrates this. The second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in all of our human relations, I believe this echoes our call to change. The fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, gives us all the capability to welcome change and use it for the greater good. And our sixth principle, the goal for a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, clearly demonstrates our call to be change agents. Now, if you accept this premise, that we should all feel a deep calling to change, the question now becomes, what if I don't like it? Change management happens to be a topic of many a book today. You can look at Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble and find a plethora of different titles, some cute and kitschy like Who Moved My Cheese, and others more mundane like How to Change Things When Change is Hard. That one sounds riveting. For the purpose of this service, I would like to borrow the definition of change management from the Society for Human Resource Management that defines it as a systematic approach and application of knowledge, tools, and resources to deal with change. In a recent writing titled Dealing with Change in the Small Church, author Glenn C. Damon outlines three major truths of change. Number one, that change is necessary. Number two, that change is hard. And number three, that change can be healing. I believe as a society today, we are all too familiar with change itself. Take, for example, the recent Pew Research Center's 2014 American Trends Panel Survey. Here come the statistics. 58% of people aged 18 to 49 saw some kind of religion shared online, while only 31% of people aged 50 or older admitted to seeing the same. Clearly, there is an age difference in which we receive and expose ourselves to religious dialogue, and this has changed considerably over the recent years. Is the influence of the internet one of those inevitable changes to our religious practices? I believe the changing landscape of our religious instruction and influence is visible even in our own faith-based community. Take, for example, the recent data available on the UUA website regarding membership in various congregations. Between the years of 2007 and 2014, the Church of the Larger Fellowship, which is the UUA's largely online church without walls, saw an average rate of growth of 4%, while all other UUA congregations combined witnessed an average decline in their membership of about 0.4%. I believe we can attribute this significant difference to the success of our denomination in embracing the changing landscape of potential congregants and their use of online technology, as documented by the findings of the Pew Research Center. Incidentally, our own congregation benefited, ironically, from the same average growth rate experienced by the Church of the Larger Fellowship for the same period, 4%, which is drastically different than the average of 0.4% decline in the rest of our UUA association. So we must ask, could our growth rate be indicative of MDUUC's ability to change with our times under the leadership of our ministers, the board, or even our lay leaders? From my personal experience in this congregation, the answer is a resounding yes. Each of our members, friends, and leaders have worked very hard to keep our faith relevant and effective in changing our greater community for the better, and I feel we should all be very proud. Even in all of this success, I am still certain that our church and our denomination will need to continue to broaden our foundation and find new and innovative ways of reaching the world with our message that love can heal. As we also know, change can often be difficult. Author Damon suggests that it is harder for some more than others. He actually portrays 4 responses to change that we all have experienced in some way when we're going through transformations. That's why the cover of your order of service has 4 faces on it, if you were wondering. The first category is the person who embraces change like an old friend. And I don't know about you, but when I see a dear friend or family member that I've known a long time, I meet them, not all of them, just some of them, with open arms and a deep, lasting hug for at least 5 seconds. While I've never recognized this rough timing until thinking about this sermon topic, it prompted me to look at recent studies that have shown that hugging actually creates spikes in the neurotransmitters of the brain, specifically oxytocin. This brain chemical has been tied to the regulation of human emotions such as trust and morality. In simple speak, its presence in the brain makes everything feel all right. Imagine if this were our reaction to change. Can you envision yourself at a major crossroad in your life, welcoming the unknown friend of change with open arms? In an article by UUA Program and Strategy Officer, Reverend Dr. Teresa Cooley, published in the UU World magazine, the summer of 2014 edition, was entitled Into the Beyond. Here, Reverend Cooley outlines what she sees as our changing church and denomination. As we change and attempt to attract a younger and more racially and economically diverse church base, we have already had to embrace change. She points out that we've widely successful examples in our association, the Church of the Larger Fellowship, as mentioned before, and also the All Souls Unitarian Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They offer 2 online streaming services every Sunday. And the UUA itself is revamping their website to actually include community tools similar to Facebook called Meetup and Drupal. These are amazing examples of how our denomination is reaching out and hugging change. Our own church has piloted and is looking into online streaming possibilities as well. And if you didn't know it already, our past sermons are all available on YouTube. Reverend Cooley concludes, the reason for change is so our values, that love is stronger than hate, that each of us has worth, that we will find truth and meaning if we search, can all be real forces in a world that desperately needs those values. The second example of how we tend to handle change is the person who welcomes it like a companion on a long journey. However, this companion must be selected with care. In today's reading, this is where we realize we didn't do the reading in the first one. We were set for the glories of Italy, only to find our dream to be shattered and the seeds of a new dream planted, much like the author felt when recognizing the difficulties and blessings associated with a special needs child. If we only ever saw change as an option to be unabashedly, unequivocally embraced, we would not spend the time required to gather all of the information about the change that we're experiencing. A perfect example of this for me was a recent business trip of mine, ironically, to Holland. It was not until the end of my trip that I had grossly realized that I had not prepared properly in the cultural sensitivities of the Dutch people. We had just concluded a business meal full of warmth, laughter, engaging discussions, and much camaraderie, as well as great food. As we stood to leave, the Dutch director of product safety came to hug me and wished me a safe journey home. I should mention that while this was my first trip to Holland, I've been to Europe several times, enough to know that many countries find it customary to share a departing kiss on both cheeks. I was, however, painfully unaware that in Holland, it's 3 kisses. She began by kissing my right cheek and then my left. At this point, I believed us to be done, but unfortunately, she was making her way back to my right cheek, and I became a little nervous, confused, and in a moment of what can only be explained sheer delirium, I went in and kissed her fully on the lips. Not good. Not good. Not good. It has been a long time since I've kissed a woman on the lips. This was quite embarrassing, bad situation to be in, and really could have been avoided by a standard cultural sensitivity class taught by my company, or just a simple Google search on my own. However, due to my tendency to embrace change rather than welcome it as a companion, I was unprepared. Damon indicates that the third way we approach change is to see it as a stranger who should be met with much caution. He indicates that when we approach change from this vantage point, we can hear our inner voice say things like, "But we've never done it like that before." In graduate school, I was assigned to a small village in Siaya, Kenya, where I worked at a district hospital studying childhood diseases and the associated sociocultural norms of the regional Luo tribe. I was adopted by a local family and taken into their compound for my 4-month stay. I should mention here that while my educational career taught me a great deal about the placement and digging of a 50-foot hole outdoor toilet referred to as a pit latrine, they neglected to explain the intricacies of its more practical usage. I very much resisted the accurate use of the pit latrine for many days, and I would instead, albeit embarrassingly to admit, through a series of complex balancing acts, remove my handmade flip-flops and disrobe before using the pit latrine. This was my ritual for many weeks, and I resisted the use of the community hole that was our bathroom. This was until the horrible day that in the midst of removing my sandal, it fell down the 50-foot hole where it remains today. While some of you are sitting in your pew right now wondering why on earth I would share such a story with my greater community, I really do believe that it is a prime example of Damon's portrayal of the individual who, when faced with change, resists it until the change proves appropriate or similar, very similar to how we might meet a stranger and keep them at arm's length until they prove themselves worthy. The final way we respond to change described by Damon is to see it not as a friend at all, but as an enemy to be deeply resisted. Today, our grammatically incorrect children's story demonstrates how harboring on this response can be overwhelmingly damaging, not only to our community, but to ourselves as well. There was Leafy, the last leaf on the tree. He was hanging on to that branch with dear life. Unfortunately, his community was without him. They had all fallen to the ground. They did not have access to his time, treasure, or talents. When we hold to current situations so tightly when faced with a change, we can certainly cause damage to our community through our absence. Damon suggests that when we are in the middle of this type of response, our words change into phrases like, "This will never work." I think it's important to notice as well that not only does Leafy's response hurt those around him, again, through his absence, but he hurts himself as well. There is a bright, exciting world down below, full of new experiences. As long as Leafy clings to his current situation, he will never come into contact with those things. It is, after all, new experiences in life that foster growth and progress for us as individuals as well as our community. Without these things, we remain forever stagnant in the present. To some of you, this sermon may seem like a series of seemingly unrelated stories, so I want to recap the main points, which I hope you'll all leave with. Firstly, that we are, as I believe, called by our religion to be change agents in the world. And secondly, that we respond to change in four main ways, or a combination thereof. I refer you again to the pictures in your order of service, on the front of the order of service. The faces symbolize the various responses to change we may face, starting with the topmost right-hand picture, moving to the topmost left-hand picture, and then repeating the same order on the bottom row. We see that each face represents our potential response to change in the following way. We can either embrace it deeply with an oxytocin-fueled hug and a smile. We can cautiously prepare for it with a smirk, so as not to unintentionally kiss a Dutch person on the lips. We can apprehensively resist with tears, causing us to lose a shoe in a toilet. Or we can resist it angrily to the detriment of our community and ourselves, clinging to our tree like the last leaf in the fall. In the upcoming months, years, and decades ahead, in our personal, professional, and religious lives, may we be the ones to know ourselves well, react to change appropriately, and flourish as the world continues its inevitable change.